Hey there. Being in a nice auditorium like this in front of a beautiful crowd like yourselves takes me back to my first week on campus. I sat in an auditorium not dissimilar to this one. I filed in there in the middle to the back. I sat beside a guy and a girl, and I listened to a professor. And the professor started talking. He started reading from a set of slides. And over the course of class, we realized that he was reading from a set of pre-prepared slides that came with the textbook. And the slides summarized the textbook chapter that we were supposed to have read before we got there. The girl to my left fell asleep. The guy to my right fiddled around on his laptop. I did not go back to that class again. The word lecture, the origin of the word lecture is lectus, which in Latin means that which is read. Here we have a lecture hall in the Middle Ages. As you can see, there's a professor standing with a book from which he's reading, and students who are taking notes. Here we have a lecture hall today. Notice anything similar? Here we have a professor standing in front of a crowd of students. Those students are again taking notes, and that professor's reading. This time maybe it's from a set of PowerPoint slides. So we've got all of this power in our pockets. We've got more information at our fingertips than generations before us could ever have imagined. Yet this is what's happening in the classroom. Makes no sense to me. 11. Now, this is the number of times that a student will check his or her phone during class. 92. This is the percentage of students. The percentage of students who send a text message during class. Now think about that for a second. There are about 500 of you here in this room. I'm basically giving you a lecture. What that means is that 460 of you are going to send a text message at some point during my speech. 8 seconds. This is the average attention span of a student in class today. I kid you not. It's down from 12 seconds in 2000. So what I'm telling you is that we had 4 more seconds than you guys in my day. Now, clearly things have changed, right? I'll give you another stat, and that's 79. Who here has felt anxiety when you're without your cell phone? Okay, a good number, right? 79% is the percentage of Generation Zers who feel anxiety when separated from one's cell phone. So clearly, we have changed as a society. For better or for worse, technology is impacting us in ways we never could have imagined. The ways we learn are changing, yet the way we teach has not evolved in hundreds of years. I want to talk to you about some small changes that are already happening, some big changes that could happen, and 5 things that I think will happen in a big way over the next 5 years. First off, this is something I think many of you would like to see happen. We will see the end in the next few years of the traditional textbook. Here we have a chart that some of you might have seen. It maps textbook prices. As you can see, there's CPI. Over the last 35 or so years, the cost of goods and services in our society has risen by about 250%, right? So slowly but surely, there's been a rise in prices. Certain other areas of the economy, like housing, have seen slightly faster upticks than that. And then we have textbook prices. Textbook prices over the last 35 years have risen in over 900%. So 3 times as fast as everything else in the economy, textbooks rise in price. So why is that? Textbook publishers have taken advantage of something that economists refer to as an agency cost. The person who makes the buying decision, the professor, is not the same person who actually pays for the product, the student. And these 2 customer groups have very different wants and needs. Now, you would think that with this agency cost and with these rising prices, these textbook publishers, they just must be making a killing, right? Well, here's Pearson's stock price. And you can see that big dip. It dipped 30% in a single day 10 days ago. These guys are under threat. So we think they must be making money, but they're not. So why? Who here has bought a used textbook before? Yeah, nice. Everybody put their hand up. That's good. So did I. So with all of these people buying used textbooks, the textbook publishers have been forced to iterate on their model. So they're now releasing new versions of textbooks every 2 to 3 years. Every couple of years, you've got version 7 of algebra going to version 8. Now, what does that do? It introduces a ton of new costs into the system. Distribution. Well, prior to that, editing. Prior to that, graphics design. Prior to that, finding authors who are going to rewrite these textbooks. When you add up all of the costs, it's pretty clear why these guys have an unsustainable business model. And the publishers are constantly trying to get ahead of students. But they're failing. Students aren't just buying used. They're photocopying books, they're scanning them, they're downloading torrented ebooks, they're sharing books. Some students don't even buy the books at all. So they're under threat. The physical textbook is going the way of the dodo, right? But that's not the only reason why these guys are under threat. Second is that user-generated content will become the norm. Now, it's unfathomable to me why this hasn't come sooner. For years, people have been talking about how there must need to be a Wikipedia of textbooks, right? So you guys all know the story of Wikipedia and how it completely disrupted the encyclopedia industry, right? The encyclopedias would produce these nice, beautiful versions that would go up on people's shelves, much the way that textbooks are sitting up on your shelves, version 2, version 3, version 4, and then boom, the snap of a finger, they were gone. But it hasn't happened in universities yet. There are movements around open educational resources, but they haven't gripped us. They haven't taken over in the way that we expected them to. So why? So first off, in higher ed, there's a very high bar for quality. Textbooks need to be peer-reviewed, and that comes at a cost. Secondly, it's about the priorities of your professors. The priority of a professor is research, research, research. Maybe teaching comes down 4th or 5th on the list, right? Unfortunately. And as a result of the professor's priority set, any content that's delivered needs to be accompanied by a suite of resources to make it easy to deliver. That's why what I believe we'll see over the next few years is the emergence of teaching platforms, interactive teaching platforms that will allow professors to create content, edit content, collaborate on content creation, and ultimately distribute that content out to students. These platforms will have all of the bells and whistles that professors require. And they'll also come with built-in marketplaces. A marketplace which will allow professors to make a little bit of money from peer review or even creating content, but not so much to gouge students. And so what you'll see is that $300 general chemistry textbook, it goes down to 1/10 the price, but with better quality and greater interactivity. What else are we going to see? With the emergence of everything online, from Google, in which you put your daily thoughts, and who can probably tell you more about each of us than we can tell about ourselves, to Facebook, where we're putting in all of our personal information, Instagram, uploading all of your photographs, we've shown that we're willing to trade our privacy for products that deliver significant benefit to us in one way or another. We haven't seen that in higher ed yet, but a recent Ellucian study has showed that 98% of students say they would give more personal information if it were to enhance their educational experiences. That's what we're going to see. The emergence of platforms that will track whether students are coming to class, for better or for worse. I wouldn't have liked that. Whether they're participating in class, whether questions are right or wrong, or outside of class, how people are progressing through their texts, where the stumbling blocks are. And getting all of this data will help identify which students are struggling, which ones are not, which ones are likely to pass, which ones are likely to fail. Ultimately, it will help us intervene to stop students from failing out of school. Next, you guys have seen a VR exhibit outside of here today. We have Google Glass, Oculus Rift. These things are operating right now at the periphery. Soon enough, these will come to the core, and VR will need to be integrated into the classroom. Let's think about a surgeon, for example. He's performing a surgery that he or she hasn't done before, so it's something complex. In the past, this person would have had to read a textbook, maybe talk to a peer, look at a couple photographs, and then jump in there, putting the life of that person under the operating table at risk. Now surgery students can put on their helmets and practice the surgery as many times is needed to get it right the first time. I believe that classes across the board will be transformed in this very way. Next is new methods to engage students. We talked about the changes in our attention spans, we talked about our reliance on mobile devices, yet the vast majority of professors do not allow mobile devices in the classroom. This also must change. I like to think of Harvard physicist Eric Mazur here. He talks about the way that he likes to run his class. He says, look, I will ask my students a question, I'll see how people did, and then I'll pair the students who got the question right with those who got the question wrong. And I'm going to have the students who got the question right teach those who got the question wrong how to do things. And students start teaching themselves. It's only through use of technology, when you're standing in a large lecture hall, that you can start facilitating some of those interactions, that you can facilitate collaboration, that you can enable group work, that you can get students out of sitting and listening to somebody and into participating with one another and taking advantage of all the brain power that's in the room at that very time. Next, it also comes down to the skills. Now, bringing all of this together, we should think about the skills that are required for the next generation. So a large body of research around education to employment. And to summarize it, it's that schools oftentimes believe that they're equipping students with the right skills to enter the workforce. But when you survey students after they enter the workforce, and you survey employers, they often say the opposite, that students are not prepared for the demands of today's workforce. And that's just today. With artificial intelligence, the workforce will change dramatically in the next few years. From robo-surgeons to algorithms that enable the financial industry, to a great example is Ross, the intelligent attorney, which scours all sorts of legal documentation and is paired with IBM Watson's supercomputer to become this high-powered paralegal that can do the vast majority of paralegal functions today. When you think about examples like this, it's no wonder that a recent Oxford study said that about 50% of jobs in the US, which should hold true here in Canada as well, will be automated by artificial intelligence and technology in the upcoming years. So what does that mean for today's student? We need to stop teaching students to regurgitate. This is not about a professor reading from a book and students writing down. This is about teaching critical thinking skills. It's about teaching students to be adaptable. It's teaching students to become creative problem solvers. It's having students experiment to learn how to do these things on their own. So when I imagine the new lecture hall, I imagine a student comes into the lecture, and rather than telling the student to put his or her device away, the professor says, all right, let me quiz you on it. I'll ask you a question, maybe a little poll, work through a quiz. I'll have you collaborate. You pair the students into groups of 3 or 4, and they work through exercises together. As a professor, I can engage back and forth in discussions, I can answer questions, I can provoke dialogue, and then start looking at the data of that class and saying, okay, these are the areas in which people are getting concepts today, and these are the areas in which we need to hone in a little bit more. And maybe at some point in the class, you slap on your VR headset, and you say, okay, if I'm in a chemistry class, let's take a look at what a molecule looks like up close in person. Or if I'm in a history class, maybe I'll go back a couple hundred years and see the way that things were actually like and experience them firsthand. What we need to imagine is ways to integrate the technologies that we have into the lecture, which will allow students to be taught the way they need to be taught and the way that they actually learn. Thank you.